The paradox of vagueness, Sorites conundrum. The Sorites paradox presents an intriguing and perplexing dilemma that challenges our understanding of category definitions and the concept of vagueness. This paradox, which has fascinated philosophers for centuries, emphasizes the difficulty of establishing clear boundaries in situations where minor incremental changes seem to defy straightforward classification. To comprehend the essence of this paradox, it is essential to first delve into its origins, the nature of vagueness, and how these ideas relate to the Sorites paradox. The Sorites paradox derives its name from the Greek term soros, meaning heap. It is traditionally attributed to the ancient Greek philosopher Eubulides of Miletus, who posed the paradox in the context of determining when a seemingly trivial collection of grains of sand becomes a heap. The classic version of the paradox goes like this: a single grain of sand does not constitute a heap. Adding one grain of sand to a non-heap does not turn it into a heap. Repeating this process leads us to the conclusion that no matter how many grains are added, a heap will never form. The paradox emerges when we recognize that at some point a collection of grains undeniably becomes a heap. However, according to the paradox logic, it is impossible to pinpoint the exact moment or the specific number of grains that causes this transformation. This inability to establish a precise threshold challenges our understanding of how we define categories and how gradual changes can result in significant differences. At the core of the Sorites paradox lies the concept of vagueness. Vagueness arises when the boundaries of a category or concept are not well defined, leading to borderline cases where it is uncertain whether something belongs to a particular category. In the case of the Sorites paradox, the term heap is inherently vague because it lacks a clear definition regarding the minimum number of grains required to form a heap. Vagueness is not limited to heaps of sand. It pervades many aspects of language and thought. For instance, consider the adjectives tall, rich, or old. Each of these terms is vague because there is no precise point at which someone becomes tall, rich, or old. The Sorites paradox can also be applied to these concepts. If adding $1 does not make a person rich, at what point do they become rich? Similarly, if a 20-year-old is not considered old, and adding a single year does not make them old, when do they reach the point of being old? The Sorites paradox demonstrates the difficulties posed by vagueness in logical reasoning. It forces us to confront the limitations of traditional logic, which generally operates under the assumption that categories are clearly defined and that every statement can be classified as true or false. However, when dealing with vague concepts, this binary approach falls apart, leading to paradoxical situations like the Sorites paradox. One might attempt to resolve the paradox by insisting that there is a precise number of grains of sand at which a heap appears, even if it is undetermined. However, this solution is unsatisfactory because it fails to address the continuous nature of the transition from non-heap to heap. The paradox endures because our language and concepts do not neatly align with the gradations of reality. The implications of the Sorites paradox extend beyond the example of sand heaps. It raises broader questions about how we use language, how we define categories, and how we interpret the world around us. The paradox challenges the assumption that every concept must have clear and definite boundaries, suggesting instead that many of our concepts are inherently vague and resistant to strict classification. Furthermore, the Sorites paradox invites us to reconsider the nature of logic itself. If traditional logic cannot accommodate the vagueness prevalent in everyday language and thought, perhaps new forms of logic are required to address these challenges. This paradox has prompted philosophers to explore alternative approaches to reasoning that can better handle vagueness and the complexities of categorization. The Sorites paradox challenges not only our conceptual understanding of categories, but also forces us to confront fundamental issues in logic, semantics, and the philosophy of language. The paradox implies that traditional logical tools may be inadequate when dealing with vague concepts, which has led to various philosophical responses aimed at either resolving or at least better understanding the dilemma it presents. Classical logic operates on the principle of bivalence, which asserts that every statement must be either true or false. This principle forms the foundation of much of our reasoning, from mathematics to everyday decision-making. However, the Sorites paradox exposes a major limitation of bivalence. It struggles to account for cases where a statement does not clearly fit into either category. For instance, in the context of the Sorites paradox, the statement, "This is a heap of sand," may not easily be classified as true or false when dealing with a borderline case, say, a pile of 50 grains of sand. The paradox forces us to question whether every statement about the world can truly be classified as either true or false, or whether some cases require a more nuanced approach. Several philosophical theories have been proposed to address vagueness and the Sorites paradox. One approach is epistemicism, which suggests that there is indeed a precise cutoff between a heap and a non-heap, but this point is unknowable to us. According to epistemicists, the vagueness of terms like heap arises from our ignorance of the exact conditions that define the concept. While this view maintains the law of excluded middle, every statement is either true or false, it argues that our inability to identify the boundary is due to epistemic limitations, not the absence of a boundary. Another approach is fuzzy logic, which rejects the notion that every statement must be true or false. Instead, fuzzy logic introduces degrees of truth, allowing a statement to be partially true or partially false. In the case of the Sorites paradox, rather than asking whether a collection of sand grains is or is not a heap, fuzzy logic would assess the degree to which the collection is a heap. For example, a small pile might be considered 30% a heap, while a larger pile could be 70% a heap. This approach aligns more closely with our intuitive understanding of gradations in vague concepts and offers a more flexible framework for reasoning about them. Supervaluationism is another response to the paradox. It holds that, although vague terms may not have clear boundaries, we can still reason about them consistently by considering all possible ways of making them precise, known as precisifications. A statement is true if it is true under every precisification, false if false under every precisification, and indeterminate otherwise. In the context of the Sorites paradox, supervaluationism would assert that while there may be no single clear boundary between heap and non-heap, we can still use the term meaningfully by recognizing that some cases are borderline and others are not. The Sorites paradox also has broader implications for how we think about language and meaning. If our language is filled with vague terms that cannot be precisely defined, this suggests that much of our reasoning is based on concepts that are inherently imprecise. This raises important questions about the nature of meaning itself. Are meanings fixed and determinate, or are they fluid and context-dependent? Some philosophers, such as Wittgenstein, have argued that the meaning of a word is not determined by a fixed set of criteria, but by its use in language. According to this view, the concept of a heap is defined not by an exact number of grains, but by how the word is used in various contexts. This perspective shifts the focus from finding precise boundaries to understanding how language functions in practice, acknowledging that vagueness is an inherent part of communication. An important consideration is the role of context in resolving vagueness. In many cases, what counts as a heap or any other vague category depends on the context in which the term is used. For example, on a beach, a small pile of sand might be considered a heap,
context of building a sandcastle, the same pile might not be considered a heap. This suggests that vagueness may be less about the inherent properties of objects and more about how we categorize and interpret them in different situations. Contextualism, the view that the meaning of vague terms depends on the context, offers a way to navigate the Sorites paradox by acknowledging that our judgments about categories are often influenced by situational factors. This approach emphasizes the flexibility of language and the importance of considering the practical circumstances in which terms are applied. The Sorites paradox not only presents a challenge to classical logic and philosophy of language, but also has significant implications for how we approach problems of categorization, decision-making, and even ethical dilemmas. The paradox forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that many of the categories we rely on in daily life are not as clear-cut as they seem. This realization has led to various proposed solutions, each attempting to reconcile the paradox's challenges with our intuitive understanding of the world.
The Sorites paradox has profound practical implications, particularly in fields requiring precise decision-making, such as law, medicine, and ethics. For instance, consider a legal context where laws often rely on vague terms like reasonable, sufficient, or negligent. The ambiguity inherent in these terms can lead to borderline cases where it is unclear how the law should be applied. The Sorites paradox highlights how small incremental changes, such as the number of grains of sand, can lead to significant consequences in such cases. In medical ethics, the paradox can arise in end-of-life care decisions, where terms like quality of life or terminal are often used. These concepts are not always precisely defined, and small changes in a patient's condition may not clearly indicate a shift from one category to another. This ambiguity can make it difficult for doctors, patients, and families to make informed decisions, as the criteria for quality of life can be subjective and context-dependent. Moreover, the paradox is relevant in public policy, where decisions often depend on classifications like poverty or risk. In these cases, policymakers must draw lines based on quantitative measures, but the Sorites paradox reminds us that such lines are often arbitrary. For example, determining who qualifies for financial aid or who is at risk from a particular environmental hazard involves drawing boundaries that may not align with the continuous nature of the underlying conditions. The Sorites paradox also raises ethical questions, particularly in the context of gradualism, the idea that small changes over time can lead to significant differences in ethical discussions. Gradualism often comes into play in debates about actions that seem morally permissible in isolation, but could lead to undesirable outcomes when repeated or accumulated, sometimes referred to as the slippery slope argument. Consider the issue of honesty. Telling a single seemingly harmless lie may not appear to have significant moral consequences. However, the Sorites paradox suggests that if we continue to tell small lies, at what point does this behavior become morally unacceptable? The paradox challenges us to consider whether there is a precise moment when a series of small, morally neutral actions cross a threshold and become unethical. This problem is also evident in environmental ethics, where small incremental actions such as pollution or resource depletion may not seem harmful on their own but can lead to significant environmental damage over time. The Sorites paradox forces us to confront the difficulty of identifying when a series of seemingly insignificant actions leads to a substantial ethical breach, raising profound questions about our responsibility to consider the cumulative effects of our behavior. In attempting to resolve the Sorites paradox, some philosophers and scholars have turned to alternatives to classical logic. One such approach is contextualism, which suggests that the truth value of statements about vague terms depends on the context in which they are made. According to this view, whether a collection of grains of sand counts as a heap may vary depending on factors such as the speaker's intentions, the purpose of the conversation, or the community's standards. Contextualism allows for flexibility in reasoning, recognizing that our judgments about vague terms are often context sensitive. This approach offers a pragmatic solution to the Sorites paradox by allowing for different interpretations of vague terms in different situations, rather than insisting on a single fixed boundary for concepts like heap. Another approach is paraconsistent logic, which allows contradictions to coexist without leading to a logical explosion where everything becomes true. In the context of the Sorites paradox, paraconsistent logic would permit the acceptance that a collection of sand grains could both be a heap and not a heap, depending on how we interpret the terms. This approach challenges traditional notions of consistency in logic, but offers a way to navigate the paradox without forcing a definitive resolution. The Sorites paradox also has implications for artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning, particularly in the development of algorithms that must categorize data or make decisions based on vague criteria. AI systems often rely on binary classifications, but the Sorites paradox suggests that these systems may struggle with concepts that do not have clear boundaries. For example, an AI designed to detect spam emails must determine at what point a series of borderline cases, emails that are somewhat suspicious but not clearly spam, should be classified as spam. The paradox highlights the challenge of programming machines to handle vague categories, as the criteria for classification might not always be clear-cut. This raises questions about the limitations of AI in dealing with the subtleties of human language and decision-making, where vagueness is a common feature. The Sorites paradox serves as a powerful reminder of the complexities and ambiguities that pervade our everyday concepts and reasoning. By exposing the difficulties in drawing clear boundaries within vague categories, the paradox challenges the foundations of classical logic, forcing us to reconsider how we categorize, make decisions, and apply ethical principles. The various philosophical responses, from epistemicism to fuzzy logic and contextualism, offer different ways of understanding and addressing vagueness, each highlighting the need for flexibility and nuance in our thinking. Whether in law, ethics, or technology, the Sorites paradox compels us to recognize that many of the distinctions we rely on are not as precise as they appear, urging us to approach such challenges with greater awareness and sensitivity. As we continue to grapple with the implications of the paradox, it remains a central puzzle, inviting ongoing exploration and reflection. The paradox of the unforeseen exam. The paradox of the unforeseen exam is a logical conundrum that delves into the conflict between anticipation and astonishment. It begins when a teacher informs a class that an exam will take place sometime during the upcoming week, but it will remain a surprise. This paradox pushes students to reconcile the idea of an exam being both scheduled and unpredictable. The scenario unfolds as the teacher announces that the test will be administered on one day within the week, but it should come as a surprise to the students. The essential condition is that the exam must occur on a day the students do not expect. The task for the students is to figure out the exam's day based on this information. Initially, students might consider various days for the exam. If they think Friday is a potential day for the test, they realize that if the exam hasn't taken place by Thursday evening, it must be on Friday. This insight means the exam wouldn't be a surprise anymore, as they would have anticipated it. Therefore, they might eliminate Friday as a possible choice. They would apply the same reasoning to Thursday, concluding that if the exam hasn't occurred by Wednesday, it must be on Thursday. This process of exclusion continues backward through the week, ultimately leading the students to believe that the exam can't happen on any day. At first glance, this logical deduction appears flawless. If the exam cannot be on any day, students might assume the teacher's announcement is contradictory. However, if the teacher administers the exam on, say, Wednesday, it would still be a surprise. This outcome contradicts the student's logical conclusion that no day could satisfy the surprise condition. The paradox lies in the contradiction between the student's reasoning actual outcome. Their logical elimination of each day based on the surprise condition results in a paradox when an unforeseen exam actually takes place. This paradox raises fundamental questions about our understanding of prediction and surprise, especially when confronted with conditions that seem to contradict the very event they are supposed to describe. The core of the paradox of the unforeseen exam is to probe the limits of our logical reasoning when applied to situations involving both predictability and surprise. It challenges our intuition regarding how we predict events and how those predictions align with the occurrence of unexpected events. The paradox unfolds as the process of elimination leads to a conclusion that contradicts the actual result, offering a profound insight into the complexities of anticipation and expectation. Expanding on the paradox, we explore deeper concepts of knowledge, expectation, and self-reference. The puzzle offers a distinct perspective on how these elements interact to create a situation that seems contradictory. One crucial concept to examine is self-referential reasoning. In this paradox, the student's awareness of the teacher's announcement influences their reasoning about the exam. The teacher's stipulation that the exam will be a surprise creates a scenario where the student's attempts to predict the exam day actually diminish their chances of being surprised. The self-referential nature of the paradox complicates logical reasoning, leading to an outcome that seems paradoxical. The paradox also highlights the concept of epistemic uncertainty, which refers to the uncertainty caused by our incomplete knowledge. In this case, the student's reasoning is based on their insufficient understanding of when the exam will occur. This uncertainty drives them to exclude all possible days, yet the exam could still occur on a day they considered impossible. The paradox reveals how epistemic uncertainty can result in unexpected outcomes, even when logical reasoning seems to provide a clear path. Another relevant concept is confirmation bias, where individuals tend to search for information that supports their pre-existing beliefs or expectations. In this paradox, the student's elimination of days based on the surprise condition reflects confirmation bias. They are trying to find a day that fits the surprise condition, but end up excluding all possibilities. This bias influences their reasoning and contributes to the paradoxical conclusion. The paradox can also be analyzed through the lens of decision theory. In decision-making, individuals often use logical reasoning to predict and plan for future events. However, the paradox of the unforeseen exam shows how predictions can be complicated by surprise conditions. Decision theory underscores the importance of acknowledging uncertainty and the possibility of unforeseen outcomes, emphasizing the limitations of static reasoning models. To better understand the paradox, we can consider dynamic prediction models, which adapt to changing information and real-time updates. Unlike static models that depend on fixed assumptions, dynamic models account for the evolving nature of predictions. The paradox shows how static reasoning can lead to contradictions when faced with surprise and uncertainty. By exploring the paradox through these different perspectives, we gain a deeper understanding of how knowledge, expectation, and self-reference intersect to create a complex, counterintuitive situation. The paradox challenges our instinctive understanding of prediction and underscores the limits of logical reasoning when dealing with unexpected events. By investigating the broader implications of the paradox of the unforeseen exam, we can appreciate its philosophical, practical, and educational significance. The paradox offers valuable insights into how we comprehend and manage prediction, surprise, and uncertainty across various contexts. One key philosophical question raised by the paradox is the nature of knowledge and prediction. The paradox questions the belief that complete knowledge or logical reasoning can fully account for future events. It highlights the limits of our ability to predict outcomes, particularly when surprise is involved. This realization invites us to reassess our assumptions about knowledge and prediction, acknowledging the inherent uncertainties in our understanding of the future. The paradox also has practical ramifications for decision-making and risk management in the real world. Decision makers must account for uncertainty and prepare for unexpected outcomes. The paradox of the unforeseen exam illustrates the difficulties in managing expectations and preparing for surprises, highlighting the importance of adaptability and openness to the unexpected, even when logical reasoning seems to provide clarity. In education, the paradox raises important questions about the effectiveness of surprise assessments. While surprise exams can motivate students and test their preparedness, the paradox encourages educators to think carefully about how surprise is balanced with clarity and fairness in evaluation. It prompts a re-evaluation of assessment practices and their impact on students' learning experiences. The paradox also invites reflection on the psychological aspects of surprise and expectation. Our expectations shape how we perceive and respond to events. The paradox of the unforeseen exam demonstrates how our mental models and expectations can influence our experiences of surprise. This insight has implications for understanding human behavior and how we manage our expectations in various settings. Finally, the paradox serves as a reminder of the complexities of logical reasoning and its limits. While logical frameworks can provide useful insights, they may not always be equipped to handle situations involving surprise and uncertainty. The paradox challenges us to recognize the boundaries of logic and explore alternative approaches to understanding and managing unexpected outcomes. In conclusion, the paradox of the unforeseen exam offers valuable insights into prediction, surprise, and knowledge. By examining the paradox from philosophical, practical, and educational viewpoints, we develop a deeper understanding of how we approach and interpret unexpected events. The paradox reminds us of the complexities and limitations of logical reasoning and the importance of being prepared for surprises in various aspects of life. The Bootstrap Paradox, a journey through time and causality. The Bootstrap Paradox, alternatively known as the causal loop or ontological paradox, challenges our fundamental understanding of time and causality. It emerges in time travel scenarios where an item or piece of information is sent back in time, ultimately becoming the cause of its own existence. This creates a self-sustaining loop, one that lacks a clear origin, making it difficult to trace the starting point of the event. To better illustrate this paradox, consider the following example. A time traveler journeys to the past, bringing with them a copy of a well-known novel. The traveler gives the book to a young aspiring writer who reads it and is inspired to become a renowned author. This writer then proceeds to write the very book that the time traveler brought with them. In this loop, the book seems to exist without any clear origin. It appears to come from nowhere. The paradox underscores the issue of causal loops, situations where cause and effect intertwine and loop back on themselves. In this case, the book's existence creates its own past, leading to a situation in which the book has no clear point of creation. This paradox creates an endless cycle of creation, with no apparent beginning. Grasping the Bootstrap paradox requires engaging with time travel theories and examining how these ideas impact our perception of causality. Time travel introduces the concept of reversing time, which allows for the alteration of past events, leading to self-fulfilling outcomes. In the case of the Bootstrap paradox, an object or piece of information is sent back in time, initiating its own creation. This raises crucial questions about the interconnectedness of time and causality. In classical physics, time is viewed as linear, moving from past to present to future. However, the Bootstrap paradox offers a non-linear perspective, where events may loop back on themselves. This challenges our intuitive understanding of cause and effect, defying the straightforward progression of time. The paradox also raises critical questions about the nature of existence and information. If something can exist without a clear origin, it forces us to reconsider the fundamental nature of reality. How can something come into existence without being created or originating from a distinct point in time? The Bootstrap paradox challenges our basic assumptions about the creation of information and objects. As we dive deeper into the Bootstrap paradox, it's important to explore its implications for our understanding of time travel and causal relationships. The paradox disrupts traditional notions of time and causality, suggesting that time travel could lead to complex and paradoxical outcomes. It also raises philosophical questions about the origins of objects and information. In the next section, we'll take a closer look at how the Bootstrap paradox operates in detail, analyzing the logical structure of the causal loop and its broader effects on our understanding of time and causality. In the second part of the Bootstrap paradox, we'll delve into the logical framework of the causal loop, exploring how it reshapes our understanding of time and causality. By analyzing specific examples and theoretical implications, we can uncover deeper insights into the paradox. Let's consider an alternative version of the classic example to further clarify the paradox. A time traveler brings back a blueprint for a highly advanced machine. The time traveler gives this blueprint to a scientist in the past, who uses it to construct the machine. This machine, in turn, sends the blueprint back to the time traveler, completing the loop. In this case, the blueprint exists without a clear origin, forming a self-sustaining causal loop. This example highlights the recursive nature of the Bootstrap paradox. The blueprint and the machine are tied together in a loop, where the creation of one relies on the existence of the other. The loop creates a situation in which both the blueprint and the machine seem to exist without a distinct point of creation. This recursive quality challenges our conventional understanding of cause and effect, where we expect an event or object to have a clear origin. The paradox also raises questions about the stability of such loops. If an object or piece of information is caught in a loop of self-creation, it could lead to contradictions or inconsistencies. For example, if the blueprint or the machine were altered, it could disrupt the loop and create imbalances in the timeline. This raises concerns about the feasibility of such loops and whether they could exist in a stable, consistent manner. Another vital aspect of the Bootstrap paradox is its impact on logical consistency. The paradox challenges the principles of logic and causality, as it suggests that events may occur without a clear cause or origin. This undermines the traditional idea that every effect must have a cause and that each cause must precede its effect. The Bootstrap paradox disrupts this linear understanding, leading to a scenario where events may loop back on themselves without a clear beginning. Additionally, the Bootstrap paradox intersects with debates on free will and determinism. If events are caught in a causal loop, it prompts us to question the nature of free will. Are our actions predetermined by the loop? The paradox implies that if time travel and causal loops are possible, they could influence our decisions, potentially leading to a deterministic universe where events are preordained by the loop. As we continue to explore the Bootstrap paradox, it's essential to examine its broader implications for our understanding of time travel and its potential impact on reality. The paradox challenges our assumptions about time and causality, suggesting that time travel could give rise to complex and paradoxical outcomes. By examining these implications, we can gain a more profound understanding of the paradox and its significance. In the final part, we will reflect on the broader implications of the Bootstrap paradox, focusing on its effects on our understanding of reality, time, and causality. We will also explore how the paradox informs our views on time travel and its potential consequences. The last section of the Bootstrap paradox explores its impact on our understanding of time, causality, and reality, offering reflections on these complex concepts. By considering the paradox's influence on our perception of time and causality, we gain a deeper insight into the questions and challenges it raises. One major consequence of the Bootstrap paradox is its impact on our understanding of reality. It challenges the belief that objects and information must have a distinct origin by presenting a situation where an object or a piece of information exists in a causal loop. The paradox prompts us to reconsider how we view existence and the origin of objects. It makes us question whether the concept of an initial cause is essential for understanding the nature of reality. The Bootstrap paradox also challenges our views on time. It suggests that time is not always linear and that events may loop back on themselves. This non-linear perspective challenges our traditional understanding of time as a straightforward progression from the past to the present to the future. The paradox encourages us to explore alternative models of time, such as cyclical or multidimensional frameworks, which might better account for the complexities of causal loops. In terms of causality, the Bootstrap paradox challenges the belief that every effect must have a cause, and every cause must precede its effect. The paradox intertwines cause and effect in a loop, disrupting the linear causality that underpins classical physics. This disruption raises questions about the nature of causality and whether our understanding of cause and effect needs to be revised to account for time travel and causal loops. The Bootstrap paradox also deepens our understanding of time travel and its potential consequences. If time travel and causal loops are possible, they could lead to complex and paradoxical outcomes that challenge our conventional understanding of the universe. The paradox pushes us to consider the effects of time travel on reality and how it might alter the course of events. It also raises concerns about the feasibility and stability of time travel scenarios, questioning whether they can exist without creating contradictions or inconsistencies. Finally, the paradox prompts us to reflect on the nature of knowledge and information. By presenting a scenario in which information exists in a causal loop, the paradox challenges our understanding of how knowledge is created and transmitted. It raises questions about the role of information in shaping reality and whether our current models of knowledge are sufficient to explain the complexities of time travel scenarios. In conclusion, the Bootstrap paradox offers a profound exploration of time, causality, and reality. By examining its implications, we gain insight into the challenges and questions it raises about these concepts. The paradox invites us to reconsider our assumptions and explore new perspectives on time travel and its potential consequences. The Sorites paradox, also known as the paradox of the heap, is another example of how our understanding of these philosophical concepts can be tested.